I want to introduce our first speaker, and I'm really happy that she's here with us because she's teaching the African American curriculum over at Wakefield. And that is a big step for Arlington. And considering I'm waiting for the day when African American history is just American history. If we all look back at our history, we all are related in some kind of way. And the great thing about history is that it brings us all together in a very unique and wonderful way. So without ado, I'm going to read a little bit of this bio. I hope I don't mispronounce anybody's name here. Ms. Antoinette Dempsey-Waters is a 21-year master educator. She's been teaching in Northern Virginia for the past 17 years and the recipient of the 2019 Mount Vernon Ladies Association History Teacher of the Year Award. Congratulations. She's the co-chair of the Development Committee of the College Board's AP African American Studies and previously created the African American History curriculum for Arlington Public Schools and is one of the co-authors of the African American curriculum for the state of Virginia. That BA in history and secondary education from Temple University, and a master's in education, curriculum, and instruction from Georgia Mason University. Mrs. Dempsey-Waters has been featured in Huffington Post, The Washington Post, Atlantic Magazine, WJLL TV, ABC News. Videos of her students were included in last week's Tonight with John Oliver, and most recently featured in Arlington Magazine, NEA Today, The Elective in U.S. News. In February of 2024, the Virginia House of Delegates and Senate passed joint resolution number 173, commending her on her work as a visionary educator in Arlington Public Schools. Well, congratulations again. Personal note, Antoinette resides with her husband and her two sons in Bowie, Maryland, where she's currently working on designing various teaching materials for African American studies. Her kids are sick, so we're going to feel for her, so we're going to not to hold you too long. So without further ado, Antoinette Waters.
Okay, so I'm just the warm-up act. I will say that I am not a Sojourner Truth hardcore scholar. Like, I have been doing a lot of writing over the years because AFAM is my jam. So I go into these wormholes every so often. And when I think of Sojourner Truth, we have to start to think about the idea of resistance and resilience, as well as her deep, deep, deep faith. And so she is a very spiritual person, and she truly believed in forgiveness. And that was kind of her legacy that she left, the idea of resilience at the end of it all and how we bounce back. And so I will always admit that I am always learning. And some of the things that she forgave, I'm going to be honest. I don't know if my spirit is that great. Okay, so more information. I always like to let people kind of go into their own wormholes. I've been going into wormholes since I was about 14 years old. I've been living in the wormhole of African American studies since Mildred Taylor's book. I don't know if anybody knows, she's an old author. Mildred Taylor wrote a book, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. I don't even know if y'all even heard of it. Like, a few people may not have heard, like some people may have heard of it, but Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. And I then went into Let the Circle Be Unbroken, and then I became like the family historian. I was like 14 years old, like interviewing my grandpa. And I was like, oh, well, tell me everything. And so then he was like, okay, what do you want to know? I was like, oh, I want to know the whole family history. Tell me everything. And so then I went into these wormholes of not finding the information. And I got frustrated. And so my mother, who I adore because she indulges my education, like she was like, oh, we'll just buy her a whole set of encyclopedias. My father said, what? And that was back when the encyclopedia salesman knocked on your door. Y'all remember him? Yeah. And so he would knock on your door, and my mother was like, come in. And my father's like, no. Do you know how much a set of encyclopedias cost? And my mother's like, but she's going to live at the library. We want her to be at home so she's in the comforts of her home. And so that then started this love of going to the encyclopedia and doing a lot of research. So I spent probably my middle school years and then in my high school years either in an encyclopedia in my house with my nose inside a World Book encyclopedia, or then in the card catalog. Y'all remember that? Y'all know. And then you know how you pulled it out and you were like, ooh, I know I can go to the books, like 2 in the front and 2 in the back. And then, because we had to learn the Dewey Decimal System back then. And I don't even think kids even know what it's called. Like, they're like, what? Dewey what? What is Dewey? John? What? So, it's kind of these whole wormholes that I've been going into. And so I always like this books for more information because there's a lot that we can peel out of. So with Sojourner Truth, she was illiterate. So she did not know how to read and write, but what she did was she did pretty much pin her narrative, but she did it through someone else. And so she goes to Olivia and she asks Olivia, can you help me with this? And so Olivia is this young lady who's like a governess. She's working in Massachusetts. She's working with William Lloyd Garrison and a lot of those folks. And so she's kind of worked with Frederick Douglass, looking at his stuff. And this is like right after Frederick Douglass's narrative, which is a hit. And so they're like, hey, why don't you create your own narrative? And at this point in time, she really wants to buy a house. Like, that's her biggest thing. She wants to purchase her own home for her children. And then you have Sojourner Truth, A Life, A Symbol by Nell Irvin Painter. She's one of my favorite historians ever. I absolutely adore Nell Irvin Painter. And then we have one of the earlier narratives that was more so that biography about her. It goes on to be more biographical because she only has this one narrative and she kind of spends her life more so in ministry. And it's very elusive. And so you have Sojourner Truth, Slave, Prophet, Legend, because this is going to be a different type of book. Whereas Nell Irvin Painter's is more reflective and it kind of goes through these 3 parts. And that's kind of how I divide her life up into these 3 parts. The Slave, the Prophet, the Legend, that's another idea of how we do this 3 parts. And most scholars look at Sojourner Truth's life as these 3 parts of her life and how she has this legacy at the end. So let's think about if we take this whole entire quote, this is really who she was. This kind of embodies her. And so when we start thinking about life and legacy, resistance and resilience, this is who she is. The idea of not being afraid to stand alone. The idea of standing for truth. And I think about what Scott was saying earlier when he was like, the governor and different people who are not truth sayers. And so as we kind of go through the journey of looking at the actual full story of America that's not nostalgic, we can then look at someone like Sojourner Truth with a lot of respect. Because she's not one of these people that we have this nostalgia over where we have to make up a story. She's a person who really lived her life embodied in truth. So that truth sayer. And so how we really remember truth sayers. And I really love this quote by her because this is it. Like, I'm not afraid to fight for what's right and standing on truth, no matter if I'm all by myself. And that's that whole idea that when we think about her life as well as her legacy and what she leaves us with, I think this is one for me that really kind of helps me as we go on this journey sometimes and you're like, I'm the only one on this branch. Like, it's me alone. And so I remember this from her because she was that person who did not mind being the first. So this is kind of how we're going to break this up. I'm going to go as quickly as possible because I know y'all have some other things to do, but also y'all want to see Karen because she is the reenactor. She is the reenactor. So I'm going to make sure I keep it short, sweet, and to the point and give you what you need. And so really it's just the introduction of me, her birth, her life, and her legacy. So that's how I really want to break it up. Her birth, her life, her legacy. Because she is born one person, but she then spends her life outside of enslavement, the idea of freedom. And we don't want to think about, when we really think about a legacy, when a person lives free and they have self-emancipated, we want to respect that self-emancipated journey, not that legacy of drudgery, but what they really want us to know who they are, which is that life and that legacy. So God already introduced me. I don't have to say much about myself. So he already introduced me. I am a part of the development committee for AP African American Studies. That has been my, baby for quite a number of years. I literally had a baby and then went into writing this larger curriculum like all around the same time. And so the development committee members and myself, they all like see the age of my youngest son and they're like, okay, that's the age of the framework and the age of the course. I am currently working on the textbook because people don't tell you, hey, yeah, you're part of a group that writes a course for the country. Don't forget there needs to be a textbook. What? Oh, yeah, there's that. Yeah. And don't you want to write it? What? Write a textbook? Me? And they're like, yeah, tell them how to teach it. And so that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm writing a teacher's edition of a textbook. The most boring thing ever. For my 6 years, so it's like more writing and then writing some more and then writing some more and then living in what I was doing at 14 years old, my nose in an encyclopedia and in a book. So I'm right back there, never got out of the book, just literally right there, still in a book, still doing a lot of research and doing a lot of writing. So kind of those skills I got at 14, I'm leaning into them in my 40s. Right for that. And then I've been teaching in Arlington Public Schools, which I truly adore because Arlington Public Schools really supported me on this journey from the very, 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 very beginning when I was that rogue teacher who's like, let's write an African American history curriculum. And they're like, okay, Antoinette, let's do it. And supported me from the very, very, very beginning when I went on the journey to helping to design the AP course with College Board. They were like, hey, Antoinette, what do you need from us? And so it really has been the most welcoming experience. And that's why I drive all the way from Bowie to Arlington every day, because Arlington was the place that truly supported me as the person who was standing alone. Like Sojourner said, the person who was standing alone and standing on truth. And so that's something that I really cherish, which is why I drive an hour every day here. Give some context to her life, right? So let's give some context to Sojourner Truth's life. So there are going to be some terms that I think you all should know for that time period. So there's a thing called a freedom suit. After the Revolutionary War, and they were talking about Lafayette, who came back on his final visit, he was very, very, very unhappy with America, like super unhappy. And this is after the Missouri Compromise of 1820. He comes back in 26 and he's like, what? What are you doing? Are you crazy? And so during this time period, there are lots of African Americans who are going to sue for their freedom. They're called freedom suits. So a freedom suit is going to happen in various states. And these are different people who are like, I am suing you and suing my enslaver based on the principles of the Declaration of Independence. And then they're also looking at the Bill of Rights and they're basing it on the principles of the Bill of Rights. And so you have these freedom suits happening. Now, because you have these freedom suits happening, you then have parents gaining their freedom, but then their children are staying enslaved through this convoluted thing called an apprenticeship. I didn't know you could, be a human trafficker when you're like doing apprenticeships and things of that nature. So they have these apprenticeships where they'll take people whose children should be free and living with their parents. And they're like, oh, you can't provide for your child. So they have to live with me and work for me so that I can live off of that. And so that's that practice of the keeping of children of free people. And that is a practice actually that will not only be right after the Revolutionary War, but that practice will actually happen after the 13th Amendment in the South. They'll continue to do this and kind of kidnap people's children and say, oh, your child needs a job. They're in an apprenticeship. So this whole idea of apprenticeships lasts for a really long time. You'll have some states that do gradual emancipation. So after the Revolutionary War, there is an argument between a lot of states people. Lots of states people are arguing over those revolutionary principles. And with those revolutionary principles, you have states that will start gradual emancipation laws. Pennsylvania is going to be your very first state that kind of comes up with it because you have folks like Ben Franklin and Alexander Hamilton. They're kind of like, I don't think we should be doing this whole enslavement thing. Like, this is wrong. And so when people have this little statement like, oh, people didn't know it was wrong. Yes, they did. Trust me, they knew it was wrong. Or else you wouldn't have had gradual emancipation. Like, maybe you got to fix that story a little bit. And so you'll have these states that have these gradual emancipation laws, but within those laws were some fine print. There were age limits, meaning there was a limit before you could actually gain your freedom. You had to reach a certain age. So there was still this free labor situation. And then after we pretty much start our country, Eli Whitney creates the diabolical cotton gin. And now you have this market for enslavement south. And you have these groups of people who should be free, but now their parents are free, the kids may not be. Let's just go sell some children. And so that gradual emancipation gets really wonky. So you end up with a lot of freedom suits coming from that. And finally, that diabolical cotton gin, which changes the trajectory of the United States from rice to King Cotton. And so now you have something that people were like, we can finally get rid of it. We can maybe get rid of it. We've got these little laws. I think we can get rid of enslavement. You have Ben Franklin in 1790 writing this petition to Congress, like, we got to get rid of this. This isn't right. We need to give folks money. We need to do right. And then the shift happens. And now cotton becomes the #1 export of America, building it, literally making it into a global empire. Pretty much by 1851, we will be the exporter of about 76% of the globe's cotton. The NYCE's original name is the New York Cotton Exchange. It ain't had nothing to do with currency. The currency is cotton. And so when we start thinking about that cotton gin, it changes the trajectory of the United States of America. And so we have to kind of understand what's going on in Sojourner Truth's world outside of her and what she is fighting against when she's doing her sermons, when she's traveling, how she is this abolitionist when all of this other stuff is going on, especially once she gets to Washington and she's like, oh, this is pretty diabolical. And like, she really kind of looks at some things and becomes very reflective.
That like the cotton gin was going on? Like,
yes, because they will try to sell her enslaver. We'll get to that. Her enslaver will try to sell her son. So she sues the enslaver. She's one of the first women after the revolution, because there's some women who come before her, but she's one of the first women after the revolution to sue her enslaver because he tries to sell her son south.
Okay, sometimes they try to keep them in the dark from even knowing what's going on.
No, so she's born, and we'll talk about, so if you look at her birth date, right? So she is born, oh, we don't know what date, right? We don't know because enslaved people really didn't know their birth date. We have around about 3 years.
Yeah.
At this point in time, everybody knows.
Yeah.
Like it is not like not happening. Like literally folks in Pennsylvania are trying to beat the clock.
Yeah.
To sell as many people as possible, to make as much money as possible, because they're feeding the beast of the South. And it is a beast now. It has gotten out of control. And the thing about that 1790 petition by Ben Franklin, he dies and it dies in committee. So he dies and so does the bill. It dies in committee because people are like, we're not going to talk about it. We got 1808. So they're playing kick the can to 1808, which is the end of the international slave trade. By 1808, this thing is ugly. This thing is super, super ugly, because we'll go from exporting 2 million pounds of cotton around 1791, coming out of the Sea Islands of Georgia, and that's that really fine, beautiful cotton. We will then go from that. In 30 years, it's entrenched and it gets bad. It starts getting worse. And so she sees all of this. Let me go forward. Skip. Okay, so more context. Everyone knows these numbers. These numbers are huge. The thing about the United States is it's going to be a little bit different because they are last to the show. Like they're the last ones to the show. The Portuguese have it on lock. The Dutch have it going. The Spanish, they got their thing going. And the French have their thing going. Great Britain is fighting. Should we do this or should we not? I don't know. I don't know. Should we do it? I don't know. And so there are all of these people arguing over it. And you have Sir Francis Drake like raiding folks. And you have all of these people who are like questioning, is it okay? And so since they're last to the party, they aren't going to import really directly from Africa until later on. And that's going to be your folks out of Massachusetts. They're going to be your shipbuilders. They'll go and kind of go off the coast of Africa to get folks, and they'll be taking them straight to South Carolina. They want to go to Charlestown or Charleston today. And so we have not as many come directly from Africa. Our biggest piece is going to be that second Middle Passage, that selling of children, folks who are in the North who are going to try to get rid of folks. The Virginia, Maryland area becomes one of the #1 locations where enslaved people are going to be sent to the Deep South. They become what they call breeder states. And so you have these folks heading down to the Deep South to feed that cotton piece. And you also have that internal network of production and people having babies naturally, and they will then sell the babies. And so if you listen to Frederick Douglass, he'll call them in his first narrative human fleshmonger, right? That's what he calls in slave trade. He calls them a human fleshmonger. And so we have over 1.5 million people who will be basically taken from their families and sold to these far off regions of the South to never be heard from again. So those are the many thousands gone. Ira Berlin will write a book all about the many thousands gone who will just not be displaced and not know their family. So all of this is going on because remember, Sojourner Truth's parents are enslaved by a Revolutionary War hero, right? And they're enslaved by this guy who fought the revolution, this colonel. And so she's born right after the revolution. And there's a lot going on in this time period. And so we have all of these questions, and African Americans are there when all of these documents are created. So they know what's going on. And so now we have to start thinking about how she then leans into spirituality and into Christianity to basically say, this is not right. And we're thinking about it from that idea of morality. And so she is thinking about this morality piece. And there's always going to be this tug in the United States, money over morality. Which wins? This tug, this pull between the two sides, morality versus money. And that's really where Sojourner Truth falls into this, the morality piece. Out history, you have all of this going on. We have these Black conquistadors that are going to come here with those folks who come here from the Iberian Peninsula. So those are those Iberian Africans, and then some folks come with them. And so you're going to have different types of Africans coming here. Some are going to be conquistadors, some are going to be enslaved. And then we start seeing those very first folks come in 1619 right here to Virginia. Those folks are actually, most of them are going to gain their freedom because chattel enslavement doesn't really exist. We know they are from what today is called Angola. So we know they're from Ndongo. So that was the area of Ndongo. So that's where Queen Nzinga was from. So they're from Ndongo, so they're Ndongans. So you'll see De Angola at the end of a lot of people's name. And that De Angola meant that was where they're from. So 1619, you'll have those first folks come here who are literally stolen merchandise. The Dutch raided a ship. They ended up with some enslaved folks, and they're like, yo, we got to get rid of them. Let's go to Virginia, because that's kind of like where the pirates hang out. That's kind of like where, you know, those rogue agents hang out. And at this point in time, there's no true definition of chattel slavery in the United States. So it's 1619, that's when they first get there. Massachusetts and Virginia will be those very first areas that start codifying enslavement into colonial laws. Like there's this codification period where people are really starting to question some things. And Virginia basically, after Elizabeth Key, after her lawsuit, when she actually wins, because she's like, excuse me, hey, we're going to go by British law. After that, Virginia then changes all of their laws and says it's going to be matrilineal. So we then end up with this new piece. And so then you have Gloucester County, you have some rebellions happening. People are starting to rebel. You've got marriage restrictions starting to begin, because what's happening is with intermarriage, men are starting these freedom suits for their wives. So now you have a problem, freedom suits. And so because the woman can't go and sue because we got this 1662 law, husbands are now going and they're suing for their wives. Then they're like, no. We got to stop that part. Like, we're stopping all this because people are suing with those freedom suits based on revolutionary principles later on. They'll continue this lawsuit. And then you have that Germantown petition, and that's going to be that region of Pennsylvania, because remember, Sojourner Truth is Dutch. They're going to have some issues, right? In Pennsylvania, in New York, with some problems with the Dutch and the Quakers, and all of these folks arguing over, is this right? And so they're looking at it with morality. And this is how Sojourner Truth will live her life, the idea of God. And she'll say so-called Christians. And then with that Germantown petition, it gets really scathing. Like, how can you do this? And how can you hold another person in bondage? And so she lives kind of on these principles that were already set out before she came to be. So then we start looking, 18th century Black history, and we start looking at what happens, and we start looking at those Revolutionary War principles. And this will say 1800s. So then you have the Black Seminole. You start seeing some Ohio laws that are supposed to be free states. And so now Sojourner Truth is alive. And we're looking at some stuff happening for African Americans that are changing the trajectory, that are totally against, 150% against revolutionary principles. Because revolutionary principles say all men are created equal, period. And we're looking at enlightenment and how does this go against those principles? And so we have this idea of morality, and folks arguing morality and arguing for their freedom based on the foundation of America. And then you got the money guys, the guys over there. I don't care anything about that. I care about money. And so we have this problem in America money versus morality. And it will be this tug as we create an identity. So let's talk about her story. So now we got the context. Do I have any questions? Okay. So now we got her context of what's going on around her that's really going to influence her, right? So she is being influenced by these revolutionary principles. She then has to watch her parents pass away. They don't have a home. We've got this whole gradual emancipation after these colonies and then the Revolutionary War. Now they're going to be states under the Articles, create their first constitutions, and this gradual emancipation for some. Her parents will never get their freedom. She will be the first one to. And she literally says, I walked out. And so and this is really wonky. Her father was very tall. So she speaks Low Country Dutch, right? So we all know that the Dutch, if people didn't know, the Dutch were here first, right? The Dutch are here first. The English come later. The Dutch bring with them Africans who have this, what we call half freedom. And so it's like this practice where African Americans kind of live out. They kind of have their communities. They're able to have their families. And so Isabella, before she's Sojourner, knows her parents very well. They live together. They're in this family kinship group. The selling and human trafficking comes after that diabolical cotton gin. So she is born Isabella Baumfree. Now, the spelling of Baumfree is wonky because there's a Low Country Dutch spelling. Then there is this American English spelling. And then you will have this other last name, Van Wagner. Like sometimes you'll see it Van Wagner. Like sometimes you'll see Isabella Van Wagner. So she has kind of three different names when she's Isabella because they spell Baumfree different and then they add Van Wagner based on an enslaver. So she's sold about 3 times before she's 18 years old to various Dutch farmers, right? And eventually she ends up with some English farmers and she actually can't speak English. So she has to learn it pretty quickly, really, really, really quickly. She, at 18, like all young girls, is in love with this man. He's a freeborn African-American man. And her enslaver is like, no, that's not who you're going to be with. Why? Because he probably going to sue for your freedom. And we're not going to have that. We're going to have you no, we're not doing that. And so he basically forces her to marry Thomas. And they have 5 children. So I know that there's this like question about does she have 13 children? She couldn't write, right? She gave her speech, Aren't I a Woman? But they will then rewrite it to give her a Southern accent. She's like really offended when they start rewriting it because she's like, I don't have a Southern accent. I speak Low Country Dutch. I'm a New Yorker. Like, what are you talking about? And so she gets really offended that they kind of give her this Southern twang when she is nothing close to Southern. And she wasn't even enslaved in the South. And so she really like kind of is offended by all of that. And she does not have 13 children. She only has 5. Okay. She only has 5. And in her narrative, she really doesn't talk about her children. She only talks about her one son. And so she walks away to freedom. She does not run. She walks. And everybody's like, wait a second, she walked? Yes. She took her baby, her youngest daughter. Her enslaver basically said, I'm coming. I'll free you. This is Jamal. So Jamal says, yeah, I'm going to free you, which is why I don't understand why she forgave him afterwards. But that's neither here nor there. I told you I'm still working. I'm a work in progress. But anywho, so she takes her baby girl and she walks away. She goes and lives with some friends who are going to help her. Now, we have to think about the idea of how could a person walk away from their other 4, right? So we have to start thinking about what she must have been going through to walk away from the other 4. But as I start to become reflective and kind of think about it, I think she probably knew where they would always be because of the tradition of families staying together. This second Middle Passage situation is brand spanking new. Human trafficking like that was a new capitalistic endeavor. The commodification goes out off the charts. And so I don't know how she could do that, but in her narrative, she does not talk about it. She only talks about the one son. She does not talk about her daughters. She lives with them, but she doesn't, in her narrative, talk about them in depth. And a lot of times, a lot of people believe it was because she was such a staunch Christian and lived a very pious life. She did not like the life that they were living once they were free. And so she really doesn't talk about that. So let's talk about her life. Her enslaver, as she's gone, takes her son Peter, sells him to a human fleshmonger. Those are Frederick Douglass's words, not mine. Okay, I want everybody to know it came from his narrative. So she then finds out that he's going to sell her son, and she's like, "Oh no, 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 no! I'm going to sue." So she's the very first African American during the time of the Republic to do a freedom suit, right? Now, we had Elizabeth Key back in the day, but that's when we were colonies. Sojourner's like, "You're not going to sell my babies." And none of her children are sold after that. But this particular young man, they were trying to sell him. So she sues, and she actually wins. She wins because they're like, "You're supposed to be the status of your mother." Isabella is free. This is before she's Sojourner. Isabella is free, so her children should be free. And so then she has to work out a deal for this apprenticeship. Still working with that apprenticeship. But she does prevail. He cannot sell her children. And so now with this comfort, she's able to take her son, and of course, they are bound, what they call bound out. Because there was a limitation on jobs for African Americans due to job discrimination, people had to bind themselves out, which was to live and work with a family. Isabella will do that with a minister. All right, so let's talk about some things about her. Now, she becomes a preacher, and a lot of times, I don't know if people understand that women could not become preachers. Like, they were not letting women become ordained ministers, and she actually becomes one, right? Now, she's not ordained, but they do let her go on tours. They do let her speak to groups. So she's not allowed to get, her ordainment like Frederick Douglass, but she is out there and she is preaching. And they are like, "We support you." So that's something that's really different for a woman of that time period, like really different. So not only did she sue her enslaver and win for her one child, she then after that becomes a minister. And women in the ministry, it was not happening back then. You had to really fight to become a woman in the ministry. And so basically in 1843, she'll leave New York, and she will change her name to Sojourner. So she changes her name to Sojourner because that means journey. And she's trying to take this journey and this walk with God. And she believes it's her job and her calling by God to help bring people into God. Her hope is also that when she talks to enslavers, that she can convert them through the ministry. And so that's that whole other piece why when she went back later in life and she saw her ex-enslaver and her daughter Diana was still with this enslaver as a bound woman, she forgives him because he says, oh, enslavement was wrong. I'm really sorry. And she's like, oh, that's okay. We're going to be together in heaven. Like I said, I am still a work in progress, and I know that. And so she begins to convert people to the gospel. She will become, and I don't know if anybody heard about them, the Millerites. They're like the earliest part of the Seventh-day Adventist church. So they're probably going to be that earlier group. And they're going to believe that the second coming of Jesus is going to come in about 1844, 1845. They believe in this second coming. But once the second coming doesn't come, most of the Millerites will leave. And so she starts out as a Methodist. Then when the Methodists start to get, really popular and wealthy, she's like, they're not pious enough. Because again, she lives her life. She lives a very pious life. She then becomes a Millerite, and they're going to do a lot of revivals in the woods, because this is also the time of the Second Great Awakening. She becomes a Millerite. It doesn't happen, right? Jesus didn't come. And so she's like, oh, okay, let me shift back over to the Methodist Church. And this is when she moves to Massachusetts and she meets Frederick Douglass. So Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, they all know each other. That small little circle really does know each other. And this is in 1844, after that great, as the Millerites call it, the Great Disappointment. And so after meeting Frederick Douglass, they actually don't quite hit it off, right? But she knows that Frederick Douglass has the ear of everybody. And they really don't hit it off, honestly, because for Frederick Douglass, she's an older woman, but also he's like, why haven't you learned how to read yet? Because he's like, we got to get educated. We have to get educated. We have to get educated. And she's like, no, I'm fine. And so he's like, but you're a minister. Don't you want to read the Bible? And she's like, no, God is going to come to me. God is going to come to me. God is going to speak through me. And so they will kind of bump heads, but of course they still respect each other, but they actually bump heads on that education piece, because he really does believe in education. And she's like, I am spiritual. God speaks to me. He speaks to my spirit, and I'm going to speak then to the people. And so after that, she goes to Ohio. She's also a suffragette. She's working with Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She's working with Lucretia Mott. So she's got her hands in a lot of things, right? So she's not only an abolitionist, she's also a suffragette. She also is a part of that temperance movement as well during that time period. So she's doing a lot during this time period when we think about what else is going on in the United States. And so she goes to the Ohio Women's Rights Convention, and this is where she gives the Aren't I a Woman? So again, remember I told you they changed her stuff? It was never Ain't I a Woman, because she never would have said that. She wasn't Southern. So it was Aren't I a Woman? And so there are two different, I would say, speeches that are out there. I challenge you to read both of them, because we really don't know which one is right. And as historians, it's kind of like, I don't know. They're both beautiful, but she couldn't read or write, so we don't know. And we're still questioning it today. So I always challenge people to read both of the speeches. You can decide which one you want or which one you love the most, but they both come from a person who really wanted to tell the true story of what we call intersectionality, those intersections between gender and class and ethnicity. And she is really going to be the very first person to talk about those intersections. That's her. She's that first person to talk about it, to bring up those intersections between class and gender and ethnicity. And so she's that first person. So I always challenge people to read both of them, because they both have their place in history as primary sources, because it's the very first time someone has identified that there is this space where African-American women fit that nobody else fits in. And we're in this space together, and people need to see us in this space. And so she gives that super important speech, and this really puts her on a rocket ship. Everybody now knows her. And she then ends up in DC. I know y'all like how she ends up here. She'll go to Battle Creek, Michigan. Her daughter Elizabeth moves to Battle Creek, Michigan. She gets married. She's free. She gets married, and she goes to Battle Creek, Michigan. So she'll head there for a period of time. She then gets some money, and she'll head to Washington, D.C. So she's pretty much toured the world at this point in time. William Lloyd Garrison has asked her to come over to England to start to help promote her book, because it's written the year after Frederick Douglass's narrative. And she doesn't make as much money as Frederick Douglass because she doesn't charge as much as Fred. Fred charges a whole lot. She's like, I'm going to only charge a quarter. Fred was like, why are you charging a quarter? This is why I told you to get an education. Come on, boo, you need more money, right? And so William Lloyd Garrison asks her to come over to England. She goes over to England for a time period. After she gets back from England, she'll go live with her daughter. And then there's the onset of the war, right? She pretty much ends up in Washington, D.C. So this location, y'all know this is right here with us. So everybody in this room knows this location. What's this location, guys? Absolutely. And so this is here. This is us. This is where she was. She was here, right here with us in this area. So when she comes to Washington, D.C., she comes for a lot of reasons. Number one, she wants to see Lincoln, right? Now, she's got to work that. She's got to work her situation in there, right? So getting to see Lincoln was a process. So she did what all Black people do when they don't have access. She phones a friend. She phones a friend. And she already knows her friend is, you know, the seamstress and the lady's maid to the first lady. So how about I work a hookup? Now, while she's here, she's also, since I'm in Washington, why don't I just desegregate the streetcars? Because I don't like that they're segregated. So how about I do that too? Since I don't have anything else to do but visit the President of the United States of America, you know, I might as well add something else to my resume. Why don't I just desegregate the streetcars? So when she's in Washington, she really is like, okay, this is a lot going on. Washington is not her city. She's like, this is just, I don't know. And so she's like, this is supposed to be this Republican space. She's gone to England. Remember, she's been in England. She sat at the table. People have treated her equally. And so when she comes to Washington and she's like, this is supposed to be the seat of our government, this is not cool. So we've got a lot of segregation in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., when she comes here, has passed the Emancipation Proclamation, which then means, hello, we don't have any type of enslavement. Enslavers have been paid. So you have folks who are coming into Washington. Those African Americans who are coming from Virginia, coming from Maryland, trying to get their freedom. You have all of those people who are also free. You have you have segregation going on. And she's here doing all of these different things. And she's fighting all the time. She's giving speeches. She's pretty much trying to bring people to God. She's trying to tell people stop drinking, all of those different things. And she comes to Freedman's village. So at this point in time, she'll meet Lincoln in October of 1864. Harriet Tubman at this point in time is like, are you coming down to South Carolina with me? And she's like, I'm not going down to South Carolina with you. I'm too old. Like, no, I'm going to sit here in Washington. And I'm gonna, desegregate some street cars. I'll do some stuff while I'm here, but I'm not burning down stuff and going to war like you, Harriet. Like, you go ahead and you go fight. Yeah.
How old was she then?
If we're saying she's probably, if we're looking at 1800, she's about 64. She's from either 64 to probably 67. She is not fighting in no war. She's not fighting. So remember, we're thinking, because she's about 20 years older than Frederick Douglass and 20 years older than Harriet Tubman. If we're thinking about when we believe they're born, thereabouts, right? Because we're like, Frederick Douglass is born, we don't know. He doesn't even know what, maybe 1819, we really don't know. Harriet Tubman, we really kind of don't know her birthday either. So we're thinking like she was born like 18, maybe 20. We really don't know her age either. And so she's telling these young folks, I'm not going to fight and help y'all in the war. I'm old, right? So we have to think of her age. So she's going to meet Lincoln, and basically she is here to kind of start pushing. It's October of 1864. Somebody has to start pushing his button to end it. And she's there to push the button. Somebody has to be this statesperson to say, we've got to end it. It's got to go. We got to get it done. Because remember that 13th Amendment needs to be passed before, and secession at this point in time, they call them secesh. Secesh is in town. So the secesh folks are here, which is why she's like, how in the world are y'all letting the secesh folks be here, right? So, so she has these whole new ideas about Washington and how it works because the secesh folks are here and they're negotiating. Is that me? Is that time? Okay. Okay, it's ready to go? That sounds good. Okay. And so now, after the war, she's going to work with the Freedmen's Bureau. She's going to be this person who is going to try to help the young men and women in Freedmen's Village, which is gone, but help them get jobs. Life as a suffragette. After the end of the war, enslavement is over. She then turns to her work as a suffragette. She's working with Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, because after we all know the Reconstruction Amendments come, men get the right to vote and women don't. And so now there is that issue. The hope was that everybody would get the right to vote with the 15th. Everybody, the hope was that. Everybody doesn't. And so she'll spend pretty much the last part of her life as a suffragette. So let's take a look at her legacy. So what does she leave behind? She leaves behind this legacy of faith and fighting. Those ideas of faith and fighting. What's right and what's honorable. If we go back to that original quote and think about that very first quote that we saw, that's what she stood on. She may have been alone, but she was always going to stand on truth. That idea of how we try to stand on truth. And that's kind of what I always take from her. The idea of it's okay to be by yourself because you can leave a legacy even if you're by yourself doing that on a limb. And that's pretty much it, guys. That's all I have for you all. Does anybody have any other questions? I know my time is up.
I'm going to have Karen Bostic come out, and she's going to bring Sojourner Truth to life.
I was born in the dirt and the shackles of slavery. Yet here I stand with my feet firmly upon this earth, unbound and unbroken. My skin, my dark skin has been kissed by the sun and scarred by the whips of my oppressor. My hands, my black hands are full of calluses and strong veins that run deep into my soul. They called me Isabella Bumfrey. I couldn't read or write, but I could hear. And I could hear that I was nothing more than a fused cow, less than a flock of flour. I was sold from man to man, beaten and raped. But I knew better. I always knew better, because there was a spirit in my soul. A spirit that could not be beaten or heavily chained. It was the spirit of the Almighty God, the only master that I truly served. Who would predict it that a baby born to slaves will become a prophetic preacher, a woman's rights activist, a Negro activist, an abolitionist? My name is Sojourner Truth, and this is my story. Mama's name was Dempsey. Everybody called her Beck. I just called her Mama. She had long, sweet arms, and she had eyes like a hawk. My daddy, he was bumpy. He was big and he was strong, just like a tree. My mama was always sad. She had holes in her heart. Mama and Daddy, they much obliged the master. They helped him increase his wealth. They had 12 children. They was all sold off into slavery, or they was stolen. My mama be so sad. I say, Mama, what ails you? What ails you, Mama? And she would just tell me the terrible things that happened to her and happened with slavery. We used to sleep in the cellar under the master's house. I still smell that scent, that dead earth, and the infection from the slaves who were punished. My mama just cried. She told me the story about her boy and girl. She left him in the cellar and she had to go work on the farm. It must have been winter, because master gave us a little bit of hay to keep us warm. So her boy and girl heard the sounds of the jingle bells, and they wondered what was the noise. So they left the cellar and they ran down to the hill. And it was a stranger with a sleigh. And he grabbed the kids and he put them in the box. And the kids just screamed with terror. They screamed so loud you could hear night took off over the newly fallen snow. Mama's heart just bleed. She's so sad. One night, I heard her praying, and she just said, Lord, please, Lord, just let me keep one. Just one. I didn't know what she was talking about. We go down to the bottom of the hill. When it gets dark, and we look up at the sky. My mama said, look, baby, look up at the sky. That's where God lives. And the stars, those are your brothers and sisters shining down on you. And if you ever get scared or lost, you just look up to the sky, because that's where God lives, and he'll protect you. And then me and Peter, my little brother, we were auctioned off. I didn't know what it really meant. But Peter go first, and he sold quickly. Then it was my turn. But I started to cry, because I knew I was going to never see Peter again. But then I looked up to the sky where God lived. And I said, it's going to be all right. And they pushed me. And they said, get up on that bus, get up. I stand on the bus, and they pushed me and poked me. And they measured me. It was getting dark. I didn't sail. I was sick, because I was going to go back home to Mama. And then they threw in some sheep. And I sailed for $100. I worked hard. And I grew fast, and I grew strong, just like my daddy. And then they sell me again. At least they speak my language, Dutch. It didn't last long. And then they sell me again. And this time they don't speak my language. I know what they say. I don't understand. The voices are unfamiliar. They sell me again. I understand what they say. So I was always getting big. I don't understand. I guess Master figured he beat me into some understanding. Oh, he take me to the farm. I go down the barn, and he take these green sticks, and he put the green sticks in the fire. And the sticks hardened like stone. And he took the sticks, and he beat my back. The place was blurred faces and unfamiliar voices. I belong to Master Dumont now. He not so bad, but his wife evil. She smacked my face, and she spit on me. I don't know why she hate me so. I think she know Master be touching on me. I don't want him touching on me. He hurt me. He said, pretty soon, it's time for me to start having some babies. He gonna give me to Thomas. Thomas, an older gentleman, he lived down the lane. He got other kids too. But I don't have no choice. I love Bob. Bob lived at the neighboring farm, and he loved me too. We sneak and see each other. We hold hands, and we dream. We dream of freedom. But his master said he can't be with me. Because any babies that I have gonna belong to Master Dumont, and he ain't having that. I told Bob, it's okay. But he said, no, I love you. I'm gonna speak and I'm gonna see you. So he come on and he see me, and I see. And then the master found. His master kicked the door. Didn't I tell you to stay with me? I'm gonna kill you, did. I told you I was. He just beat my butt. He just beat my butt. He gonna kill my mother. He gonna kill my mom. He just pushed. Before I come down there, he said, leave that boy alone. You gonna kill him? You kill him on your own property. You won't kill him on this property. Bob's master said, you keep that wench from my butt. If I ever see her again, I'm gonna kill her too. That was the last time I seen my Bob. So I married Thomas. And we born some babies, 5 babies. And I love them babies. And I pray every night. I pray like my mama. I pray, Master Dumont, don't sell my baby. Please, don't sell my baby. I love my babies. Don't sell my babies. Not even the one that look like him. When's freedom gonna come? When's freedom gonna come? Must have whispered into Max's ear. You say, Isabella, you sound fine girl, and you work hard. So I'm free you early. Just keep on working hard, and freedom won't come. Oh, freedom. I was so happy. I work every day. I sing and I work and I just keep it. I be so tired when the sun comes down because I work from daylight to sunset. I just work. I be so bad. I just work. I'm free. But I held my hand. So he said, I ain't gonna be free. I gotta work long. I said, Master, you lied. You said I was gonna be free. I'll take my freedom. when the stars stop shining, I'm gonna walk to freedom. That's what I'm gonna do. Okay? Don't you cry. You don't cry. I'm gonna be free. You be okay. You're gonna stay with Thomas. That's your daddy. Look at me. Look at me. You look to the sky. That's where God is. And all those stars, those are my siblings and your aunts and uncles. And all the ancestors. They look for you. They keep you safe. You always have God. You understand? You run. You go. I'm going to be free. I don't know where I'm going. But I trust God. I trust God. He's going to order my footsteps. Freedom! Freedom. Oh, Lord, freedom. Oh, oh. On the day I was set free, it was a long walk, but it was a glorious walk. And I thank God for my freedom. So much has happened as being a free woman. Nice family, they ran wagons. They were abolitionists. They took me in with some fear. I learned about Jesus Christ in the Bible and the laws of the land. Life was comfortable with them. I could come and go as I please. Yeah, I was still washing dishes and scrubbing pans, but I was free. That old Master Dumont stumbled upon me. He said, "You're going to take me back to the farm." I said, "You ain't taking me back nowhere." He said, "I'm his property." So Mr. Van Wagen bought me for $20 and gave me $5 for some food. And I thanked them. And soon after that, I heard that my son Peter was sold into slavery down south. They know that's against the law. His mean old wife. I know she did that on purpose. The Van Wagens introduced me to some Quaker friends, and we went to court. And I won my Peter back. He wasn't the same when he came back. His back had all kinds of whips on it. Each ridge on my son's back was a testament of the pain that he endured in slavery. But we was together. Nothing like freedom. The Lord spoke to me the other night. He told me I was going to go on a journey. He said, for me to tell everybody about Christ and the evils of slavery. So I picked up the kids. Took Sophia to the farm with her dad. And I went on. And the Lord ordered my footsteps each and every way. And I went and I went and I spoke. I spoke about the goodness of the Lord and how bad slavery was. And I said, Lord, you got me on this journey. and I'm telling the truth. So I changed my name to Sojourner Truth. Oh, I did. I met so many wonderful people. I lived among some white folks, and they was kind to me, and they taught me. I couldn't read and write, but I hung around educated people, and I could hear really good. I went to DC. You know, of all the things that I've done in my life as a free woman, helping to recruit Negroes, fight, become soldiers, my good works. I recruited hundreds of Negroes, and I sing to them and feed them, help clothe them. I told them they need to fight for their own freedom, and that's what they did. Making heard all about me. When I got to DC, I worked at the Freedman's hospital there, and I was shocked when I got to DC. I couldn't believe how the free Negro was living. They were worse off. They were better. The slaves were living better. The rations were better. These Negroes fought for this country. They was living like that. I said something must be done. I got this brilliant idea. I think it was the Lord's idea, though. I say we can take all that land in the West and give it to the Negroes who had forced labor and worked all those years for nothing. If we could get them that land, they could become farmers. They could take care of themselves. Called it 40 acres in the meat. Sometimes I wonder if the Negro ever got there. One day I was walking to the hospital. You know, I lived in Freedman Village. And I walked back and forth to work. I walked in. This one day I was with my friend, Hannah. She was a white girl, nice lady. She wasn't gonna do no walking. She wanted to catch a streetcar. So I said, okay. Streetcar come and I get on the streetcar. I go first. I lift my best car, get on. Conductor said, you let the lady go first. You let the white lady go first. I said, why? And like that, he pushed me and hurt my shoulder pretty bad. God took me to court. I got him fired. Every conductor started for the Negro in. But I tell you, of all the things that I've done in my life as a free woman, I don't know. I just think for some reason, folks remember me at the Ohio Women's Rights Convention. I was with Fannie Gage. It was a mess there. Oh, it was such a ruckus. I'm like, what is going on? I said, excuse me. Excuse me. Can I say something? Oh, them man just was jumping around acting a fool. I said, well, children, well, there's so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that took the Negro in the South and women in the North all talking about rights. These white men won't be in the fix pretty soon. What's all this? What am I hearing? Man over there talking about women need to be helped into carriages and carried over dishes and must have the best place everywhere. Ain't nobody help me into a carriage or a mug pot or give me the best anything. It ain't I want. Look at me. Look at my arms. I plowed and planted and gathered in the bars. You know what they hear me? Man, he's much too if I can get it. And then I don't. own children and seen them sold off into slavery. And when I cried out with a mother street, none but Jesus heard me. And I'm a woman. And then I hear all this talk. What's that thing you talk about here? What's that? Intellect. Intellect. That's it. Now what intellect got to do with women's rights and Negroes' rights? If my little cup can only hold a cat, and yours a quart, what do you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? And then, gentleman over there, that little talking about when it can't have as much rights as a man because Christ wasn't a woman. Well, where did your price come from? Where did your price come from? From God in a woman. Nothing to do with it. It's the first one that God ever created to turn his whole world upside down. All the women get together to take it back and turn it upside again. And if they ask you to do it, you men, you let it. And I oblige you all for hearing me. It's a pleasure being here this evening. An old Sojourner ain't got nothing else to say. This is my story.
So Scott and I would like to thank you all for coming.
Thank you.